In the voice of Priyanka Chopra, we live in a time where everything is public. Our meals, our moods, our milestones, everything is broadcasted. And somewhere along the way, we started to believe that if something isn't seen, it doesn't matter. That if people don't validate our choices, they aren't real. That if we don't get applause, we're doing something wrong. But here's what I want to say to you today. From experience, from reflection, from truth, you don't need the world to cheer for you in order to feel worthy. You don't need every part of your journey to be visible to feel like it's valuable. And most importantly, you don't need anyone else's approval to find peace, because real peace, real grounding, real confidence, it doesn't come from outside, it comes from within. So if you've ever felt like you're oversharing just to feel heard, if you've ever caught yourself refreshing a screen, hoping for a comment, a like, a sign that you're doing okay, this message is for you. Let's talk about how to pull your power back. Let's talk about how to stop performing for approval and start living for alignment. Let's talk about finding peace, not out there, but in here. Let's get one thing straight. Your life is a journey, not a show. And not everyone deserves a front row seat. I've learned this lesson over time through personal experiences, public successes, and private heartbreaks. When you're constantly evolving, growing, and healing, it's easy to believe that the more people who know you, the better. That the more open you are, the more connected you'll feel. But that's not always true. In fact, being open with the wrong people can leave you more exposed, more misunderstood, and more disconnected from your own truth. We live in a time where oversharing is celebrated. Social media, stories, status updates. Everything is broadcasted. People announce their moves before they even make them. But here's a quiet truth I've come to hold closely. Not every chapter of your life needs commentary. Not every moment needs an audience. You see, some people will sit in the front row of your life only to watch you fail. And some will pretend to clap while secretly hoping you trip. That's the hard truth, and it doesn't make them villains. It just means they're not meant to be that close to your light. It's not bitterness. It's boundaries. Think about it like this. When you walk into a theater, the front row gets the clearest view. Every facial expression, every stumble, every whisper, that's a privileged spot. That's access. And access to your inner world should never be given out casually. It should be earned through trust, loyalty, and genuine love. I've had to ask myself, who am I letting sit too close? Who knows too much too soon, too often? And more importantly, why do I feel the need to share so much? Sometimes it comes from a place of wanting to be understood, or validated, or loved. But here's the thing. When we give people that kind of emotional proximity without discernment, we lose our power. Because when someone knows your insecurities, your dreams, your next move, they have the ability to shake your foundation. Not everyone has the emotional maturity to hold that space with care. You don't have to shut people out. I'm not saying become a wall, I'm saying become a gatekeeper. Choose who gets to know what. Choose who gets to be in your life's inner circle. Not because you're cold, but because you're clear. I've learned to embrace the beauty of mystery, the peace of privacy. I don't need to tell everyone everything. I don't owe anyone access to my every thought. My life is not a reality show, it's my sacred space. And the more I protect it, the more peace I find. Here's what happens when you stop handing out front row tickets to people who don't deserve them. You start to hear yourself better. You start to feel lighter. You start to grow without distraction, without noise, without the weight of someone else's expectations. It's in that quiet space where the real magic happens. The transformation, the breakthroughs, the inner strength. You realize you don't need the world to clap for you every time you take a step forward. Sometimes the best applause is the one you give yourself in the mirror after you've fought a battle no one knew about. And when you do choose to let someone in, when you do invite someone to sit close, make sure they are cheering, not competing. Supporting, not sabotaging. Make sure they see your heart, not just your headlines. Make sure they respect the honor of being part of your sacred circle. Because your journey is not a spectacle. It's not for mass consumption. It's yours. So protect it, own it, honor it, and remember you are allowed to grow in silence. You are allowed to evolve behind the scenes. And when you're ready, you can step into the light, not to explain yourself, but to shine. Not everyone deserves a front row seat in your life. And that's not selfish, that's self-respect. Let's talk about something invisible, yet incredibly valuable. Your energy, not your time, not your money, not your talents, but your energy, your emotional, mental, and spiritual power. It's your fuel. It's what helps you show up fully for your dreams, your relationships, your responsibilities. And yet, it's the one thing we tend to give away so casually. We give it away in conversations that drain us. We give it away when we over-explain ourselves to people who've already made up their minds. We give it away when we post every little thing online, hoping for applause, validation, or some sense of being seen. But here's the truth: every time you overshare, over-justify, or over-give, you chip away at your own reservoir. And I get it, we all want to feel connected, we all want to be understood, but not everything in your heart, your mind, or your soul needs to be unpacked publicly. Not every emotion needs an audience. Not every plan needs a platform. Sometimes, sharing too much becomes a subtle form of self-abandonment. You start bending your truth just to fit someone else's understanding. You hand people the pen and let them write your story. And before you know it, your narrative, your power, no longer belongs to you. That's the danger of giving your energy away too freely. It's not just about being tired. It's about being detached from yourself. And I've been there. In this industry, people expect access. Access to your life, your feelings, your family, your fears. I used to think being open was a strength, and in many ways, it is, but only when it's intentional. Not when it becomes a habit of leaking your soul just to keep others close. That's not vulnerability. That's emotional exhaustion disguised as connection. Let me tell you something: energy is currency. And every interaction is a transaction. You are either investing in your peace or you're paying for someone else's opinion with your well-being. You have to be conscious of that. Because the truth is, not everyone is equipped to handle your energy with care. Some people listen just to criticize. Some people stay close just to compete. And some don't even realize they're draining you. They just keep taking because you keep giving. It doesn't make them bad people. But it does mean you have to be a better protector of your space. You don't have to be cold. You don't have to be distant. You just have to be aware. Aware of what you give and to whom. Aware of how you feel after you've shared something. Do you feel lighter? Or do you feel exposed, empowered, or depleted? That's your answer. Start noticing who replenishes you and who quietly robs you of your light. Pay attention to the conversations that spark you versus the ones that leave you second guessing yourself. Protecting your energy doesn't mean shutting people out. It means letting the right people in. It's okay to keep some things to yourself. It's okay to process privately, to heal silently, to build quietly. It's okay to let your progress be felt, not posted. You don't have to update the world on everything. Your life is not a feed. You are not an open book, just waiting for someone else to write notes in the margins. You get to be the author. You get to set the tone, the pace, the chapters. And part of that authorship is saying, this is mine. I'm not ready to share this. I'm keeping this moment just for me. There's a deep kind of power in that silence. There's wisdom in discretion. There's strength in boundaries. And most of all, there's freedom when you realize you don't owe your energy to everyone who asks for it. So the next time you feel the urge to overshare, pause. Ask yourself, is this bringing me closer to peace or pulling me further away? Because your energy is your responsibility. Protect it like the treasure it is. You're allowed to say no. You're allowed to keep it sacred. You're allowed to glow without explaining why. You know what I've come to understand over the years? There's unmatched strength in privacy, not secrecy, not isolation, but privacy. The choice to keep parts of your life sacred, untouched by the noise of the world. In a culture where we're constantly encouraged to share, to be transparent, and to let people in, choosing privacy can feel like rebellion. But it's not about hiding. It's about honoring. Honoring your journey, honoring your boundaries, honoring your peace. Let me tell you something very real. When you keep things to yourself, you keep control of your narrative. You don't give others the opportunity to interpret your life, your dreams, or your pain through their limited lens. You don't open the door for judgment, speculation, or energy that doesn't align with where you're headed. Privacy allows you to move in alignment with yourself. It lets you create without performance, heal without pressure, build without distraction. There's a kind of magic that happens when you protect your plans, your healing, your transformation. It's like placing a fragile seed in the soil. You don't expose it to the wind and rain before it has roots. You let it grow quietly until it's strong enough to face the world. I've had to learn this, especially in the public eye. When you live your life in front of cameras, interviews, and a million opinions, you start to realize just how precious it is to keep something for yourself. Your joy, your heartbreak, your dreams. When you let too many people in too early, it dilutes the power of your process. Because here's what happens when you make everything public. You invite interference. You invite noise. You invite voices that have no stake in your future but still want to direct your path. Privacy, on the other hand, creates a boundary, a space for you to listen to yourself, a space where you can fail without fear, try without commentary, and succeed without needing validation. Think about the moments in your life where you felt the most connected to your purpose, the most alive, the most focused. Chances are those were private moments. Moments when the world wasn't watching, when no one was asking questions. When you didn't feel the pressure to explain, impress, or justify. That's not a coincidence. That's power. We don't talk enough about how privacy protects your mental clarity. When you keep your journey close to your heart, you make space for your own voice to be the loudest in the room. And that's the voice that matters most. You don't need a round of applause every time you make a decision. You don't need a discussion panel every time you face a crossroads. Sometimes, the most powerful move is the quiet one, the one no one sees coming, the one you make not to prove a point but because your soul told you it was right. Privacy isn't just about keeping things to yourself. It's about knowing what belongs only to you. It's about recognizing that not every emotion needs to be posted, not every dream needs to be discussed, and not every chapter needs to be read aloud. It's okay to let people wonder. It's okay to let your actions speak. It's okay to glow in silence. In fact, that's one of the most powerful things you can do. Grow quietly and let the results speak volumes. I'm not saying cut people off. I'm saying be intentional. Choose who gets to know your deepest thoughts, your wildest dreams, your vulnerable moments. Give those pieces only to the ones who've earned your trust. People who hold space for you without agenda, without judgment. Your life is not a broadcast. It's a sacred journey. Protecting your privacy doesn't make you distant. It makes you discerning. It means you respect your inner world enough not to hand it out casually. So protect your energy. Guard your heart. And don't be afraid to move in silence. Because in that quiet space, where it's just you, your truth, and your purpose, you'll find your greatest clarity, your deepest strength, your truest power. And that is the kind of power no one can take away. Let's be honest for a second. People judge. They judge how you speak, how you dress, how you live, what you choose, what you avoid, who you love, what you dream of. And sometimes, the worst part, they don't even mean to. It's human nature. We all have perspectives shaped by our upbringing, our beliefs, our fears, our biases. So when someone hears your story, your decision, or your pain, they're not always seeing you. They're seeing a reflection of their own values and experiences. And that's where judgment begins. Now here's where it gets tricky. We think that if we explain ourselves enough, if we share more, if we let people see the full picture, they'll understand us better. They'll support us. They'll give us grace. But what really happens is this. The more you share, the more room people have to interpret your life through their own filter. They start comparing your timeline to theirs, your choices to what they would have done, your failures to their imagined standards. And suddenly, your truth doesn't feel safe anymore. I've experienced this firsthand. As someone who's lived much of her life in the public eye, I can tell you that there's no such thing as sharing just enough. Even when you think you're being honest or vulnerable, it can still get twisted into something it's not. People will form their opinions. They'll create their own story about your story. And what's worse is when they do it casually, without ill intent, but the impact still stings. You tell someone you left a job, and they wonder if you couldn't handle the pressure. You mention that you're single, and they assume you're unlucky in love. You say you're taking time off to rest, and they silently judge your ambition. It's not always loud. It's not always cruel. Sometimes it's just a raised eyebrow, a subtle pause, a shift in energy, but it still affects you. And that's why I believe in guarding your personal life with intention. Not because you're hiding, but because you're protecting the parts of yourself that deserve tenderness, not opinions. Let's get something clear. You don't owe anyone your full story. You don't need to unpack your heartbreak to make someone comfortable. You don't need to justify your dreams to earn approval. And you certainly don't need to explain your boundaries to feel valid. The people who truly care for you won't need the full download. They'll support you in silence. They'll respect the fact that some parts of your life are not up for discussion. And that's how you know who's truly in your corner. We've glamorized vulnerability on social media. We talk about being real and living authentically. But sometimes that becomes pressure to share things we're not emotionally ready to process out loud. And what happens next? You get feedback you didn't ask for. You get compared to people you were never trying to compete with, and you start to question your own instincts. Not because you're wrong, but because you let too many voices into the room. Silence can be sacred. Privacy can be a power move. Not every win needs to be posted. Not every struggle needs to be spoken. Sometimes keeping things to yourself isn't about being closed off. It's about being deeply connected to your own intuition. You know your why. You know the weight of your choices. You know what you're carrying and how hard you're working behind the scenes. So why give people the chance to misunderstand it? Why open the door to opinions that don't nourish you? Here's what I've learned. When you stop seeking validation, you start finding peace. And peace is priceless. Let people judge. Let them wonder. Let them talk. You don't have to clarify anything for anyone who's already made up their mind, and you don't need to dim your truth to avoid their discomfort. Because your life is not a courtroom, you're not on trial. You're not here to win people's approval. You're here to live fully, freely, and fearlessly. So move quietly, share selectively, and trust deeply in your own voice, because people will always judge, even when they don't mean to. But that doesn't have to stop you from protecting your joy, your journey, and your truth. We live in a world where everyone is performing. Performing success, performing happiness, performing growth. It's subtle, but it's there. The constant pressure to show progress, to update people, to prove that you're becoming something. And somehow we've started to believe that if people don't see our growth, it's not real. If it's not posted, it didn't happen. If it's not praised, it didn't count. But let me tell you something from the heart. Your growth doesn't need an audience. Your evolution doesn't need applause. And your transformation doesn't need to be broadcast to be valid. Some of the most powerful changes in my life happened in the dark. In silence. Behind closed doors where no one was watching, no one was clapping, and no one was waiting for an update. Those moments were mine. Raw. Honest. Unfiltered. They were full of struggle, self-doubt, reflection, and eventually clarity. And that's the kind of growth that matters. The kind that's real, that's rooted, that's not for show. Because here's the thing, when you grow in silence, you grow for yourself. You're not performing. You're not chasing validation. You're simply becoming. And there's something incredibly powerful about that. When no one is watching, there's no pressure to prove. You're not shaping your journey for public consumption. You're doing it because it feels right. Because your soul is calling for it. Because your next level demands it. In private growth, there's no audience, only awareness. You start listening more deeply to yourself. You notice patterns you were ignoring. You start healing in places you didn't even know were wounded. And all of that happens in the stillness, the sacred space where the world isn't shouting over your intuition. I know this might sound counterintuitive, especially in an age where self-improvement has become content we're told to bring people along for the ride, to share every step. But sometimes that becomes a trap. The moment you make your growth public, it becomes performative. You start curating, editing, filtering, and slowly, without realizing it, you're growing for the camera, not for your character. And here's what I've learned. The most authentic growth happens when no one is clapping, when the only person you're trying to impress is the one you see in the mirror. When you're not documenting it, you're living it. It's okay to disappear for a while, to unfollow the noise, to skip the updates, to simply be. Let your growth be your own. Let it be sacred. Let it be messy and beautiful and deeply personal, because when you come back, when you emerge, you won't need to explain yourself. Your energy will speak for you. Your peace will speak for you. Your presence will speak for you. And the people who truly see you, who truly know your heart, they won't need a highlight reel. They'll feel the shift in you, the calm, the clarity, the quiet confidence that only comes from doing the work in silence. So if you're evolving right now, healing, shifting, unlearning, rising, know this: you don't have to announce it. You don't have to prove it. You don't have to explain it. You're allowed to grow quietly. You're allowed to protect your process. You're allowed to bloom in private and still be proud of how far you've come. Let the world see the results, not the rehearsal. Let your light surprise them. Let your actions do the talking. Because growth is not a performance. It's a personal revolution. And revolutions don't always begin with noise. Sometimes they begin in silence, in solitude, in stillness. And that's where the real magic happens. So the next time you feel like you're not doing enough because no one's noticing, remember, you're not here to be noticed. You're here to become. Let your journey unfold without pressure. Let your growth be yours. And trust that when the time is right, the world will catch up to who you've quietly become. Here's a truth that not many people like to say out loud, but I will. Not everyone clapping for you wants to see you win. Some people are watching, not with love, but with quiet resentment. Some are not inspired by your progress, they're intimidated by it. And some, they're not cheering, they're competing. And listen, that's not your fault. But it is your responsibility to recognize that not every person deserves access to your victories, your plans, or your dreams. We grow up believing that support is automatic. That if someone is close to you, if they've laughed with you, cried with you, celebrated birthdays with you, then they're in your corner. But life teaches you otherwise. There are people who love you until you shine a little too brightly. People who root for you until you start winning more than they do. People who act like they're happy for you while quietly hoping you fall just enough to make them feel better about where they are. And that's why I've learned to keep certain things to myself. Not because I'm secretive, not because I don't want to share joy, but because I've learned the hard way that not every ear is a safe place for your good news. Let's be clear, not everyone is malicious. Sometimes the jealousy is unconscious. Sometimes people project their limitations onto your life. They can't imagine doing what you're doing, so instead of expanding their mindset, they try to shrink yours. That's why oversharing can become dangerous. The more you tell, the more they analyze. The more you reveal, the more they compare. And sometimes, without meaning to, you start shrinking your light to avoid making others uncomfortable. Stop doing that. Your progress isn't a threat. Your dreams aren't too much. Your ambition doesn't need to be toned down for anyone. But here's what does need to happen. You need to protect your momentum. That means being mindful of who you talk to, who you celebrate with, who you brainstorm with, who you confide in when the stakes are high and the plans are delicate. There are people out there who will use your dreams as gossip, your goals as competition, your setbacks as fuel to feel better about their own lives. Don't feed them. Don't give them the blueprint to your brilliance. Don't let their energy penetrate your purpose. I remember once sharing an exciting opportunity with someone I trusted, and their face shifted. Just slightly. A tight smile, a delayed congrats, a passive-aggressive comment like, wow, things just fall into place for you, how? It stung. But more than that, it opened my eyes. From that moment, I realized that not every celebration needs to be public. Some wins feel more powerful when they stay between you and your mirror. Some dreams feel safer when they live inside your heart until they bloom. And that's okay. You don't owe updates to anyone. You don't have to explain your next move. You're allowed to work in silence, protect your peace, and let the outcome do the talking. Here's the truth. The people who truly want to see you win won't need constant updates. They'll support you quietly, lovingly, without jealousy, without ego. They won't compete. They'll clap. They won't question your growth. They'll be inspired by it. And those are the people you should open up to. Those are your circle. The rest, keep them at a distance, not out of hatred, but out of wisdom. You're not being paranoid. You're being strategic. You're not being dramatic. You're being discerning. Because energy is real. And when you share your light with the wrong people, they'll dim it before it even has a chance to shine. So stay focused. Stay grounded. Keep building in silence. Keep growing in grace. And when the time comes, let your success speak so loudly that the ones who doubted you can only sit in the audience, watching, wondering, and realizing they never saw you coming. Not everyone wants to see you win. And that's okay, because you weren't born to impress. You were born to rise. We live in a world that never stops talking. Everyone has something to say. Everyone is announcing, updating, reacting, defending, performing. And in the middle of all that noise, silence gets misunderstood. People assume that if you're quiet, you're unsure. If you're not posting, you're not progressing. If you're not explaining yourself, you must be hiding something. But let me tell you what I've learned. After years of navigating both public scrutiny and private transformation, silence is not weakness. Silence is a strategy. There's something incredibly powerful about not reacting, not over-explaining, not broadcasting your every move. Because silence creates space for thought, for clarity, for strength. Sometimes the most intelligent thing you can do is say nothing. Not because you're afraid, not because you're passive, but because you've realized that energy is sacred, and not every situation, not every person deserves a piece of it. I've been there. Trust me, I've felt the pull to respond, to justify, to fight back, but over time I've learned every response costs you something, your peace, your focus, your power. And when you're constantly explaining yourself, you hand that power away, piece by piece, to people who don't even value it. But when you move in silence, you're not being passive. You're being intentional. You're choosing where to place your energy. You're choosing what's worth your voice. And you're choosing to let your actions, not your words, speak for themselves. There's nothing more magnetic than someone who doesn't need to prove anything, someone who's not rattled by noise, someone who can sit in stillness and say, I know who I am, and I don't need to announce it. Real moves are often made in silence. The most powerful growth happens when no one is watching. The biggest breakthroughs come when you're not talking about them every step of the way. And when the results show up, loud, undeniable, and rooted in truth, you won't need to explain a thing. That's strategy. Silence isn't about disappearing. It's about discipline. It's about staying focused on your goals without letting distractions pull you into unnecessary battles. It's about resisting the urge to be seen so you can actually see yourself more clearly. And it's about reclaiming your power from the opinions of others. You don't need to tell the world what you're doing while you're doing it. You don't need to convince people to believe in you. You don't need to silence every rumor or correct every misunderstanding. Because in the end, your truth will stand on its own. Let people assume. Let them speculate. Let them write their own narratives. You don't need to play defense when you're already playing offense. Quietly, confidently, consistently. Here's what happens when you embrace silence as your strategy. You stop overthinking your every move. You start acting with precision. You remove unnecessary people from your emotional space, and you realize that peace, privacy, and progress can, and often do, go hand in hand. Silence gives you the time to align your actions with your vision. It keeps your plans away from doubt, envy, and distraction. And most importantly, it teaches you to trust yourself more than you trust applause. The world has glorified noise, but those who really make a difference, those who truly rise, know how to move in silence and let the results echo. So the next time someone says, "Why is so quiet? Why haven't you shared anything? Why aren't you speaking up?" you can simply smile, because your silence is not a void. It's a choice, a boundary, a tool. It's your strategy. And when the time is right, your life will speak louder than anything you could have said. Let me say something that might sound simple, but it's one of the hardest lessons to truly live by. Inner peace does not come from being liked, followed, or validated. It comes from within. We've all been there. We share a success story, a vulnerable truth, or a new idea, hoping someone says, "Wow, that's amazing," or "You're so strong," or even just, "I get it." And there's nothing wrong with being seen. Being understood is a beautiful thing. But when your peace starts depending on how people respond to you, that's when things start to get dangerous. Because here's the reality: validation is external. It's temporary, it's inconsistent, and the more you chase it, the more distant your true self becomes. Let me tell you a little secret about peace. It's quiet. It doesn't need to announce itself. It doesn't come with applause or approval. It shows up when you stop performing and start listening to yourself, your values, your boundaries. Oversharing often becomes a way to fill a void. We think that if we let people in on every detail of our lives, we'll feel more connected, more loved, more secure. But what actually happens, we start depending on the feedback, the comments, the likes, the reactions. And when we don't get them, or when the response isn't what we expected, we feel unsettled, unsure, even rejected. That's not peace. That's emotional instability disguised as connection. True peace happens when you know who you are, even if no one's clapping. When you trust your decisions, even when no one understands them. When you can sit in silence with yourself and still feel whole. I've had moments in my life where I felt torn, between sharing to feel seen and staying silent to stay grounded, between explaining my choices to the world and simply owning them with confidence. And over time, I've learned you don't owe your inner world to everyone. Your journey, your growth, your healing, it's sacred. Not everyone is meant to witness it. And when you stop giving constant updates, you start noticing how much of your identity was tied to being affirmed. You start realizing how much energy you spent editing your life to be more digestible to others. You see the pressure that came from trying to look healed instead of actually doing the work. And that's when the shift happens. That's when you begin reclaiming your power. Because now your peace isn't tied to how people respond. It's tied to how aligned you feel, to how honest you are with yourself, to how well your outer world reflects your inner truth. When you stop oversharing, you give yourself room to process things fully. You stop outsourcing your self-worth. You stop letting external opinions dictate how you feel about your life, your choices, your pace. You start to breathe easier. You make space for self-trust. You learn to hold space for your joy, your pain, your confusion, without needing an audience. And you start seeing people differently too. You realize that not everyone who listens is supportive. That some people only validate you when you're struggling because it makes them feel superior. That others only respond when they feel you're doing worse than them. And that's when you begin choosing your peace over their approval. Again and again, quietly, boldly. Because the truth is, you don't need everyone to understand your journey for it to be valid. You don't need every decision to be applauded. You don't need a round of applause to know you're evolving. You just need you, honest, grounded, and connected to your own truth. So the next time you feel the urge to overshare, pause. Ask yourself, am I sharing this because it feels authentic, or am I looking for reassurance that I should already be giving myself? Let that be your compass. Because at the end of the day, the deepest form of peace doesn't come from being liked. It comes from being whole, from trusting yourself, from no longer needing a mirror to remind you of your worth. Inner peace comes from within. And once you taste it, No external validation will ever measure up.